Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for coming to our webinar, Securing Sustainable Feedstock for Wood Charcoal. This is presented by the Charcoal Project. Next screen, Tuyeni. I'm Sylvia Herzog. I'm the director of the Charcoal Project, and I wanted to tell you a little bit today about who the Charcoal Project is, and then also some of the things that we have coming up this year, just quickly before the webinar starts. So the Charcoal Project is a US-based nonprofit focused on finding sustainable solutions to the unsustainable production and consumption of wood and wood fuels in much of the world, but primarily sub-Saharan Africa. We do that by advocating for policy changes in the sector, by supporting clean energy entrepreneurs who are developing clean fuel alternatives, particularly in the biomass sector, and then also by providing online resources to any stakeholders in the sector who are interested in these topics. So along those lines, we have put together this series of webinars for 2021, this being the first one. As you can see from the list, it's an interesting mix from charcoal briquettes to reforming the sector to charcoal clean and affordable energy. So all kinds of topics that we'll have a lot of experts weighing in on this year. And so we hope you'll tune back in later in the year to discuss these topics with us. Next slide. So just a bit of housekeeping before we start. If you could keep your microphone and camera off, just so that we all have good bandwidth and can hear the presenters. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and questions can be posted in the chat function. This presentation will be recorded, and the recording and slides will be made available afterwards. If your submitted questions were not answered during the presentation, we will try to follow up with the materials that we give to you after the webinar. Next slide. I'd like to next give a big thank you to our contributors today. First of all, our moderator, Dr. Tuyeni Heita Mwampamba from Institute of Ecosystem and Sustainable Research at UNAM in Mexico. Dr. Mwampamba is also on the board of directors for the Charcoal Project, where we benefit from her expertise on a regular basis. Our other presenters are Dr. Njenga, World Agroforestry Center at the University of Nairobi, Charles Meshack, Executive Director, Tanzania Forest Conservation Group, Dr. Farid Dadou-Gebes, Université Libre de Bruxelles, and Dr. Bahara Satyanarayana, University of Malaysia, Terengganu. Sorry, Satya, I just butchered your name. I knew that would happen. Anyway, so I wanted to give a big thank you to them. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Tuyeni, who is our moderator today, and it's going to give you an overview of the topic and the problem that we're facing.
Great, thank you, Sylvia, and thank you everybody for being here and for sparing some time to the topic of charcoal. I will start with a little overview of the problem, and then we will have three panelists who will share with us their experiences with three very different types of feedstock systems. So Dr. Njenga will talk to us about agroforestry systems in which food and wood fuel production is done simultaneously. Charles Meshack from the Tanzanian Forest Conservation Group will share with us a model of managing natural woodlands, mambo woodlands, for charcoal production. And then Dr. Farid Dadou-Gebes and Dr. Satyanarayana will share with us an experience of managing mangroves for charcoals and other ecosystem services in Malaysia. So I'm assuming that many of you already know quite a bit about charcoal, and that it is a wood fuel that in many sub-Saharan countries, it is a primary wood fuel used for cooking in urban households. But the charcoal narrative has changed substantially over the last 30 years. And so one of the main focus of the overview that I will give is to also try to remember that charcoal and the way we understood it 20, 30 years ago is has changed, and we need to incorporate that change into the way we think about how to go about addressing the issues related to charcoal. And as you know, there are a lot of issues. I won't cover them all, just the ones most closely related to fuel wood here. So we know that charcoal is a biomass dependent fuel. It requires wood or some other type of biomass. And that sourcing of this biomass usually comes from natural forests, and that oftentimes it is considered unsustainable. That charcoal consumption is growing in Global South. And actually we'll see in a series later on, later down the year, we'll take a look at the global trade in charcoal and realize that it's growing everywhere, including here in Mexico, where I work. And that increasingly we're seeing rural consumption of charcoal happening. So our initial narrative of charcoal being just an urban energy is changing. There has been lots of efforts over the years to try to transition from charcoal to other alternative energies, such as liquid petroleum gas and electricity. These have been slow to negligible in some cases, and that the big competitor for forests, for charcoal, is agricultural expansion. So in the next few slides, I will sort of go into some of these issues a little bit deeper, so we get a better appreciation of what they mean for feedstock and for charcoal interventions. So this is a graph you've probably seen before. It's data from FAO, so it's got its issues, but it does give us a very, very good sense of the charcoal production trends worldwide and by region, with the blue line representing world production since the 60s, and it's a steadily increasing trend. So charcoal production is increasing and clearly responding to charcoal demand. And that this trend is really dominated by the red line, which is production in Africa. Production in Asia and South America is thought to have stabilized over the years. But we'll see that when we look at the top 10 charcoal producer countries, and this is data again from FAO 2015, and if we forget about Brazil for a little while, because that's really an exception to the rest of the countries, we see that some of the biggest producers are indeed in sub-Saharan Africa, such as Nigeria, Ethiopia, DRC, Tanzania, and Madagascar. But we also have India, China, and Thailand as significant producers of charcoal in the world. So charcoal is not just an African issue. I work on charcoal, for instance, in Mexico, which is a petroleum producing country, which has a similar trend of and it consumes as much charcoal as all of Europe consumes in a year. And the trend here too is an increasing trend. So one of the things that has changed probably since 2012 is how we understand charcoal's contribution to deforestation and forest degradation. So prior to 2012, when the state of the world's forests came out, the 2012, that was the first time there was sort of an acknowledgement that a lot of previous understanding of the impact of charcoal on forests was being combined with what is happening in forests or at forests due to agriculture. We're increasingly, we're we now know that a lot of deforestation that occurs in the global south is primarily from agricultural expansion, both commercial and subsistence. But we also know that charcoal and agriculture are a coupled system. We're not always capable of distinguishing which is a primary motivation for forest loss. But since 2012, as I was saying, we are associating charcoal and firewood production more to forest degradation. So if we look at this graph on the left, we can see below are the list of activities that contribute to degradation. And you see it's livestock, fuelwood and charcoal are combined as this fuchsia, purplish, fuchsia, or I'm not sure what color exactly to call this. But here it is where you see in the case of Africa, charcoal is the main and firewood are the main contributors to degradation, while in the other two continents, it's more timber logging. But we also need to remember that forest degradation is still, even though it's the lesser evil of deforestation, it can be extremely severe. We're talking about forests that might no longer function as forest systems that are unable to maintain themselves and unable to probably maintain the livelihoods that depend on them. So it is still an issue of concern. And then the other thing that I wanted to highlight that over the years, the alternative energy options that have been put on the table have tended more to substitute each other rather than to substitute charcoal. So here's an example from Tanzania in which you can see it's the proportion of the population that's using different types of energies or fuels to cook with. This is for cooking primarily. And the blue line here is electricity. So between the 90s and 2012, 2011, so a period of 20 years, you can see a gradual decrease in the proportion of the population that's using electricity to cook in the biggest city of Tanzania. The red is gas, LPG in particular, and you can see it is increasing. The green is kerosene and paraffin, which have dropped drastically over the years, and this trend continues into today. And the gray is charcoal. So what you can see is there's been a drastic increase of charcoal consumption between 2000 and 2007. And this has maintained. So while things have moved here, charcoal consumption has not really changed over the years. So that's something just to keep in mind when we talk about alternative options for cooking. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that increasingly rural areas are using charcoal. And so the narrative of charcoal being primarily an urban energy is changing. This is a phenomena that's not just with charcoal, it's with other types of consumption. We're seeing that rural consumption is becoming more difficult to distinguish from urban consumption in a phenomenon called new rurality. And so we do need when we think about intervention and we think about where consumption is happening, to put rural back on the discussion. And so all of this pretty much tells us that charcoal is here to stay for a while at least, and you've probably heard that before, and that there are several ways that we could that have been attempted to intervene in the sector to improve the the cleanliness of the energy to prove its impact on forests, to make it a more efficient energy source in terms of production and use. And I strongly recommend, for those of you who don't know, the FAO's report in 2017 called the Charcoal Transition, which proposes how to go about transitioning over to a cleaner and more efficient charcoal sector. And of course, those interventions can occur at different stages along the charcoal value chain, from the sourcing of the wood to the carbonization, so the efficiency of the kilns and the types of kilns used, to the end use, so the cook stoves and what is used to burn that charcoal for its final use. And principally of this, of course, is how we sustainably ensure that there is biomass with which to produce that charcoal. And so in this webinar, we will focus on the different options that are available and have been tried and tested for securing sustainable feedstock. And one could probably argue that if there was only one point in the charcoal value chain that you could intervene, then it would probably be exactly this end, the beginning of the production chain, with making sure that one has the biomass to produce charcoal sustainably, the feedstock. So let us begin. Well, first presentation will be by Dr. Mary Njenga, who will talk to us about the sustainable biomass production for both charcoal and firewood. It will be followed by Charles Meshack, and then by our colleagues from Malaysia. And just to let you know, to remind you that the questions we'll have all presentations in one go, and then there'll be a Q&A towards the end. You can pose your questions in the chat button. And now I pass on the mic, so to speak, to Mary. Mary, please go ahead. You can share your screen with us. Thank you.
I'm trying to share my screen.
Okay, and what message are you getting?
No. I don't know why. I can't get the icon for sharing.
So it's the green button at the bottom.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Is
it
it
will
coming
ask,
up?
Not yet.
Enough. I've clicked the.
Would you like Sylvia to share your presentation?
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
But you are, okay, I'll make your co-host. Try now.
Is it coming now?
No.
Not yet. Okay,
Not yet.
Let's do it from your end.
Okay, Sylvia. Sorry about that. We could also, while Sylvia, you're unmuted, so I cannot hear you, but we could start. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. Mary, you can see the screen with your presentation?
Yes.
Wonderful. Please go ahead.
Okay. I'm so sorry about that. So Hello, everybody. I want to give you some practical solutions on sustainable biomass production for charcoal. And the examples I'll give here is work by so many people, so many organizations, and I appreciate all their efforts in putting this together. Next slide, Sylvia. Okay, Tuyeni has given the background, which I will avoid going through again. But what I want to say that with the increase in demand for charcoal and its production increasing, our country, Kenya, has recognized that and has last year launched a bioenergy strategy to ensure we produce biomass sustainably. And we are developing other strategies that include agroforestry, management of invasive species. And the center that I work for, World Agroforestry Center, which has now merged with C4, is that we have a tree-based energy strategy. Next. Okay, let me start off by saying that as we talk about charcoal, let's also talk about firewood, as Tuyeni has said. Because what we are realizing is that this firewood collection from forest is getting worse. Women's work is never done. The studies are showing women are going more interior into the forest because the residues have been depleted at the edge of the forest. And what we are finding is that a woman of 55 kilogram carries a wood of 51. So we need to integrate firewood in our discussions. Next. Forward. Okay, I want to just talk of one single system in terms of producing biomass sustainably for charcoal. This is bioenergy and food systems. And the concept that C4 ICRAF is applying is mostly agroecology. You know, producing wood plus food, in enhancing habitat and biodiversity and climate resilience. And when we integrate in the same agroecosystem, we integrate trees, intercrop them with crops, and maybe even set aside a small piece of land within the farm, which maybe has low soil fertility, and grow a wood rot there. What we are finding is that this improves self-sufficiency in wood fuel. It also reduces the burden and the pressure to forest. But one other important thing is that it enhances biodiversity. And this way, we have more pollinators in the farms, which is beneficial to crops. And we also have natural enemies that help reduce pests. Next. Okay, let me give you a few examples of our agroecology, agroforestry examples. One of them is Regreening Africa. This is an EU-supported project, which is targeting 500,000 households and 1 million hectares by 2022, actually next year. And this is in 8 countries, 4 in West Africa and 4 in East Africa. And I just want to go into the biomass production options. There are many, like I have mentioned, wood rots, boundary planting, enrichment, But one additional one I want to add is the farmer-managed natural regeneration. In most areas, the wood for charcoal is from natural woodlands. And what we are doing with the community is that they manage these systems for natural regeneration. The stumps which are living, they are protected so trees can grow, and the seeds underground, once an area is protected, then they regrow, and also enrichment. One of the challenges that we are facing in these initiatives is the timely availability of quality planting material. And at the bottom here to the left is that we have provided a link to a manual where those who want to replicate this kind of things, they can be able to do it. Next. Next. Oh, okay. So the other example is the project on governing multifunctional landscape. It's a big project with many components, but one of them is sustainable wood fuel. This project is in Kenya, Cameroon, DRC, and Zambia. It's also EU supported, working with so many organizations, FAO, GIZ, and others. I want to just highlight one single site. This is in DRC Congo, Nyagambi landscape, the Congo Basin. If you see the photo up there with the big close, is that in the natural forest, there is also sourcing of wood for charcoal. And we are working with communities on agroforestry system. And what we are telling them here is, let the natural forest do their thing. Let's go to the farms and we grow trees for charcoal. And we are training them on establishment of nurseries, integrating acacia trees, which are preferred for charcoal in the farms, but also improving carbonization efficiency, how they make charcoal so that the yields are higher and reduce consumption. We are targeting to work with 300 charcoal producers who are also farmers, and to cover 1,800 hectares of area. Next. The other system that I want to talk about in terms of bioenergy and food system is the management of the invasive species, bushrats. You know, Carefree is working with many partners, and what they are doing here is working with the communities in Turkana and turning these menace of the prosopis into charcoal food farms. They are clearing some areas, and then they are burning the stumps of the prosopis, and in that area, they are reseeding with grass. And in some sections, they are also growing dry rad crops like sorghum, and then enrichment with native species. And also, they are also reserving some areas with the invasive species, but reducing its density and allowing some stems to grow that are harvested for charcoal. And therefore, these invasive areas are becoming charcoal food systems that are well managed and that control the spread. Next. Okay. The other example in terms of bioenergy and food system, let me go just outside Africa a bit, just to tell you this. We are working in Indonesia, where we are restoring degraded landscapes, you know, for bioenergy production and food. In this, what we have done so far is spatial estimation of the area. And then we are doing site matching, which tree species can do well where. And then we are in consultation with landowners on their species preferences. And then we have demonstrated that from the degraded areas, you can grow energy, food in a climate smart approach. Our next step is really going into scale with these business cases through public-private partnerships. Next. Okay, I know Tuyeni has mentioned that biomass energy is not just unique to Africa. I also want to just give you a hint of that there is also sustainable biomass production in Europe and UK. And in Hungary, for example, they're having plantations that are being grown for 8 to 15 years, and then they are clear cut after that for energy. They also have copy systems, like what I've mentioned here, that they are growing in very high densities, trees that sprout back, and then they are harvested 3 to 5 years, and then the stump sprout back. Next. Sorry that it's taking quite some time for the slide to come. The same thing is happening in Sweden. They are also growing short rotation forests that coppice 3 to 4 years, and they harvest like that several times, and then after 20 years, they remove and replant. And the same, next, Sylvia. And the same thing is also happening, in UK too. They are also having short rotation coppice systems where they harvest the trees and they grow. And now let me conclude by saying that, next slide, Sylvia, it's okay. Here, stop there. Okay, now let me stop by saying that, go back to the previous one, sorry, but I can just say it, is that as Tuyeni has said, I have specifically talked about agroecosystem, how we can grow trees together with food and use invasive species, but also degraded lands. And what I want to say that that is specifically on biomass production, but we cannot stop there. We have to look at charcoal and firewood sustainability from a system perspective. We reduce utilization, then we reduce wood production and the area that we need to grow. We process more efficiently with good kilns, we reduce wood demand and the area required. And then, biomass energy is a global north-south issue. I have given different examples, and what I want to leave you with is that they need to be customized. Energy food systems. For the locations, they need to be implemented to address the multifunctional needs. And the other thing is that they have to improve human well-being, in a manner that it serves people's socio-cultural needs and environmental benefits. And finally, we have all these beautiful cases of sustainable biomass production. It's time we go to scale with this. And then we have to have very effective systems to measure sustainability. Where is it coming from? The traceability issues, so that it can truly be made sustainable in Africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. And so we will not take questions now. We'll go straight to Charles Meshack, who will talk to us about the work him and his organization have been doing in Tanzania. Charles, please, I think you should be able to share your screen.
Let me try.
Super.
Can you see it?
We can see it, and you only have to move to full screen mode. Wonderful. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, good evening, everybody. So it is Charles Meshack speaking from Tanzania. I'm the Executive Director of the Tanzania Forest Conservation Group. And today I'm going to share with you our experience on the sustainable charcoal production in Tanzania. So my presentation will highlight four things. So I'll talk about the Tanzania charcoal market and the policy, and also I'll talk about the sustainable charcoal and how it is produced in natural woodlands, and also the potential to scale it up, and how we are monitoring, plus the challenges and the lessons. So as Tuyeni put it in the beginning, so charcoal is the most popular cooking fuel in urban areas in Tanzania. So despite its importance, there is little effort actually to make it produce this charcoal in a sustainable way. So most charcoal in Tanzania is produced from areas with no forest management plans. Even often is produced as a byproduct of clearing forests for agriculture. So it's basically a transition towards clearing land for agriculture. So before people clear land, then they produce charcoal. So this presentation looks at the experience of my organization in supporting communities to integrate a sustainable charcoal production into the management of their village land forest reserves. So more than 80% of the household use charcoal for cooking, both as the main fuel alongside another main fuel. So demand, for example, in 2018 was estimated to be 1 million tons in Dar es Salaam. So given a little change in the production of household using charcoal over the last 30 years, and with the about 5.6 annual population growth rate in Dar es Salaam, so the total amount of charcoal used is increasing actually rapidly. So this trend of increasing demand is likely to continue, even if some households shift to using other cooking fuels. So it is estimated at least by 2030, Dar es Salaam is likely to require at least 1.7 million tons of charcoal each year. So the total consumption in Tanzania as a whole is probably double than if we consider the urban areas plus some rural consumptions. So it is unlucky that the policy in the country, especially the national energy policy, it mainly focuses on electricity and fossil fuel. It doesn't consider charcoal as part of the biomass. So there is no strategic plan or policy to guide the supply of charcoal in the context of growing demand. And almost all charcoal in Tanzania is produced from natural woodland that do not have even charcoal production plants, as I mentioned. And the many policymakers perceive charcoal to be incompatible with the modernizing agenda. That charcoal, if we're using charcoal, then is perceived to be dirty or it seems to be undeveloped. So the motivation for why are we motivated? So TFCG's mission is to reduce poverty and conserve high biodiversity forests. And the most deforestation is on the village land. So that is where the deforestation is happening, is on the village land. So it is important to find ways for communities to benefit from their forests, reduce poverty, and provide incentive to maintain forests. So TFCG, in 2012, we received the support from the Swiss Agents for Development Cooperation to pilot and then scale up a sustainable charcoal production model. So charcoal is mainly produced, the one in which we are talking about is produced from the Mwampamba woodland. And the main dominant tree species which we focus is on the Brachystegia speciformis and the Brachystegia boehmii. Those are the main dominant species. And normally after harvesting, wood lot regenerates mainly through copsing and the root sprouting. And post-harvesting, natural regeneration is encouraged by protecting regenerating areas from disturbance. And no harvesting in sensitive areas, for instance, in steep slopes, or cutting trees of timber value, or cutting timber of higher biodiversity areas, or trees which are used by different animals. So we don't cut those trees. So the focus is mainly on these main tree species that I've highlighted. So the key steps through the sustainable charcoal production. So the first one, which once we do in the village, and this is part of the model, is first we conduct a village land use plan, including land designated as a village land forest reserve. So that is the first, and this is very important in terms of understanding the forest area which is remaining in the village land. Without doing village land, which is normally participatory, is basically the villages are likely to allocate a small piece of forest land to be a village land forest reserve. And if they do that, then that doesn't make any sense to develop the sustainable charcoal. So that is why we start with the big picture to understand the resources which are available at the village level. The second step is we allocate, so now we zero into the village land forest reserve, which people have, all the villages designed. Then within that village land forest reserve, between 15 to 20% is allocated for charcoal production. So once that 20% or 15 to 20% has been allocated, we go for the next step, which is number 3. So based on our understanding, based on our understanding in terms of how the Mwampamba woodland tree species, it grows in the rotation of 24 years. That once you cut the tree after 23 to the 24th year, that tree will be ready to be cut again for charcoal. So that is the theory we're using. Now we will divide that land or that forest into 24 plots of 15 meter by 15 meter. Now, one portion will be harvested every year. So expecting that in the 24th year, they would come back to the first plot which they harvested in the last 23 years. So that is the assumption. And the fourth step is the annual charcoal quota per village set based on the biomass assessment. So we assess what is available at that particular plot to determine how much they can harvest at that point, at that time of the year within the quota. Communities and the village council. I don't see my Let me check here. Oh. So on the step 5, we provided training to the village land and natural resource committees and the village council on forest management, governance, and the financial management, and also working also with the districts. So we build this capacity to the district also. And the 6th step is governance and the monitoring system, which we establish, and also that is linked with the district. The next step is capacity building for charcoal producers on compliance with the village land forest reserve. This includes bylaws, efficient harvesting and production techniques, and the business skills. So Charcoal Producers Association are also formed and registered with the Tanzania Forest Service Agency. So this is the government organ which regulates the forest product harvesting in the country. My slide is a bit stuck. So what are the procedures for the production? So the procedures when the business people who want to do business, they have to submit requests to the village natural resource committee to produce charcoal, and the traders pays a charcoal fee based on the number of bricks to be produced. And this fund is deposited in the village account. And then the permit is issued. So the village natural resource committee identifies the area based on the harvesting plan and instructs the producer where to harvest. And the charcoal then is produced, and the compliance is monitored. So, and that task is done by the village natural resource committee. So charcoal is transported to market accompanied by the village permits, and the government issued the transit permits. And after that, then the harvested coppers are protected from fire, livestock grazing, and the conversion into agriculture, allowing a natural regeneration. So once the area has been harvested, the key management which is required is to make sure that that area does not subjected to fire, and also livestock, and it is not converted to agriculture. So once these 3 factors are controlled, at least that ensures a smooth regeneration of the harvested area. So woodland is harvested in a checkerboard pattern to maintain a mosaic of woodland at different stages of regeneration. So what you see, the green is the village land forest boundaries, and the other color, which like bluish, is the non-forest. So this is for 2016. So the satellite images, which is showing the management unit in Kitunduweta village. And that was taken in 2020. So the charcoal is producing using the improved basic killing. So as you see, the first up, the area is cleared, and then the cut trees are stacked. You see on the left-hand picture, and then it is covered by earth. Then there is a chimney which controls air, and then on the 3rd picture on my left, the charcoal is ready, and then in the last picture on my right, charcoal is packed, ready to be transported. Oh, my slide is stuck. Okay. So the sustainable charcoal revenue are used to pay forest management costs. So some of the revenue is plowed back or is invested to manage the village, the whole village actually. So as I mentioned, the 20% which is being harvested, the revenue from that that plot manages the whole village land forest reserve. So the 80% remains intact, and that money now is used to manage the whole village land forest reserve. And that includes also buying equipment, protecting gears, and also paying the patrol team, etc., etc. Some of the money is invested in the community development initiative. So here you could see some pictures on the top left. That money was used to build a house for the medical officer, and some of the money was used to rehabilitate the village dispensary. Some of the money has been used to in water to buy reservoir tanks, and also installing water from pipes. Also, it is invested in education, building classroom, and also purchasing desk for children. And also in terms of governance, some of the money has built village offices. So in terms of status of the sustainable charcoal production in Tanzania, so we see since 2013, we have been supporting about 35 villages which have integrated charcoal into the management of their village land forest reserve. And forest area under CBFM in TFCG is about 1,033, 579 hectares. And 20% of that is about, is even less than 20%, is 22,574 hectares is the charcoal production forest management unit. And this has now produced about 10,465 tons. And the income to producer is about 0.6 million. And the income to the villages through the fee is 0.75. So the maximum annual revenue for the fee for one of the village in 2020 was about $18,250 in 2020. And then the average or the mean revenue from the fee per village in 2020 was 3,859. So the map shows the coverage. We are mainly in Morogoro village, and the project is known as Co-Forest Project. So we are mainly in Morogoro, Morogoro working in the Mbomelo, Morogoro district, Kilosa. We have also expanded to Kilolo for the second phase, that is in Iringa. But most of the efforts we are putting in Morogoro. So we see the setup of the model in the 3 districts. We feel now it is ready to be scaled up to other districts. And that is what now we are doing. So we're only setting up 1 or 2 villages in each district, which we have already identified, so that we can scale up to other districts. So Tanzania, for example, so we have about, it is estimated, we have about 21.6 million hectares of woodland and on village land. So it would require about 7 million hectares to produce the ton, which is estimated in 2018, that's 2 million, based on our model. So it would require about 7 million set aside to meet the demand of 2 million tons in the country. So that is the assumption. So if we put 7 million, we are likely to meet the demand. So scaling up has now started in the 4 districts, that is in Lindi and the Iringa region. So in order to speed up this process, actually we are trying to seeking support to scale up the model in the other region of the within the country. So we are also monitoring. We are monitoring our initiative. So the Conserving Forest Through Sustainable Forest-Based Enterprise, the Co-Forest project, is supporting research. So this research is ongoing is looking at the charcoal certification, gender policy, improved production techniques, and ecological dynamics in the community-based forest management areas. And also monitoring, the ecological monitoring system has been established. 110 permanent sample plots have been established by independent researchers from the Sokoine University of Agriculture and the TAFORI, the Tanzania Forest Research Institute. And the annual deforestation monitoring of CBFM is continuing. And also the social economic monitoring system is under development. So what are the key lessons? So far, we see that charcoal will remain a key source of energy for next few years to come. So we don't see charcoal as a source of energy will continue to be used as a source of energy. So we also see sustainable charcoal production is possible in Mwampamba woodland and it can regenerate multiple benefits, as I mentioned. And also there is a potential exists to improve the environmental sustainability, governance, and the economic benefits of charcoal value chains. And it is also possible to scale up sustainable production, could be accelerated with the political buy-in and achievements and the investment in capacity building. So strong connection between researchers and the practitioners can improve the outcome of charcoal value chain, and that means more research is required. So we recommend that some of the recommendation is that supporting more communities to establish sustainable charcoal production and the community-based forest management, strengthening policies that support sustainable charcoal production and the infrastructural coordination, modernize the value chains, for example, using digital product tracking system, promoting the latest kiln and the stove technology, professionalize production by promoting best practices, providing professional training, and also adopting standards, and also increasing compliance. But also we need to make sure that broad stakeholders dialogue and the cooperation to move towards sustainable charcoal production to overcome the barriers to scale up. And also, which we are also looking at, is to develop financing model to support scaling up and ongoing technical support. So that is the end. You could have more information here if you could follow on Twitter, the co-forests, and also the presentation has a drone experience from 2 papers which we published, and also you could visit our website. Thank you. So that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Meshack. There are so many questions in the chat. This is fantastic. But we will move on now to Farid and Behara and their experience in feedstock from mangrove forests in Malaysia. Farid, please go ahead and upload your presentation.
Yes, I'm trying to share it.
There we go.
Just let me know if you see the screen, the title screen now.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Go ahead.
All right. Satyam, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you for it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name, you can call me Satyam in short. It is easy for you to remember and pronounce. So I'm delighted to be here today on board with you all to share some of the experiences about the charcoal production from a mangrove ecosystem. You have been listening to the woodlands and terrestrial woodlands. Now I will take you to the coastal woodlands. Let us go. Change for it, slide. Yes, here you are. So see how beautiful the mangrove ecosystem. You can see the roots and the structural complexity of the root system in the mangroves. It is not only helpful for them to hold land and survive, but also this root system, this particular root system, helps other animals to come and acts as a rescue for the other animals. So it has so much unique ecological benefits, mangrove ecosystems, ecological, socio-economic benefits. So the picture what you are seeing is rhizophora forest. Okay, then as I said, the mangrove, the green belts along the coast, they're quite unique, especially to have a protection from the surge penetrations, including tsunamis, to protect the people and property along the coast, to the carbon sequestration, and it acts as a breeding and nursery ground for so many finfish and extracted from mangroves can be used to house constructions and fishing stacks and so on. You will be surprised, the mangrove is also known to have tigers inside. If you know the Sundarbans mangrove ecosystem bordering India and Bangladesh, there are Royal Bengal tigers. They live in mangrove forest. Anyway, the mangrove are unique system, ecosystems that contributing a lot of goods and services. What recently the authors of this publication try to highlight is like public perceptions are very much important for the conservation of mangroves, because earlier the people used to have a downgrade look for mangroves as wastelands, but now people, after the event of tsunami, Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, they realized the importance of the mangroves, and then slowly their perceptions are changing. Anyway, the perceptions can be widely spread through social media and very useful for their protection. As I said, the mangroves acting as breeding grounds, spawning grounds, and the many fishes and prawns, they come and hatch in that areas. Many animals, they take refuge there, and the mangrove, the leaf litter serve as a good rich organic food for the animals there, and also the mangrove good in the primary production systems. What is most important is the carbon stored in the mangrove ecosystem. Carbon, Farid, carbon. The carbon. So if you can see the scientific observations, the carbon sequestration, the carbon storage in the mangrove ecosystem is 3 times more than any other forest on the land. So the mangroves, this is an important element to mitigate the global warming. So mangroves are so crucial for us to have less impact of the global warming. And so we have to conserve the mangrove forest and its diversity. Next slide, please. Yes, to see the carbon estimates, and then definitely you have to come up with the biomass estimation inside the forest. So here, we make a plot inside to forest to measure the diameter and height and so on, the parameters. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, see how this is a unique ecosystem, as I said. Even to measure the diameter of a mangrove tree, sometimes you have to climb 2-3 meters. Can you imagine? It's so nice. It is that the research in mangroves is not only challenging but also fascinating. So it is an enchanting ecosystems to be conserved a lot. Now I take you to Malaysia. Malaysia is the second largest country supporting a big mangrove cover of 630,000 hectares. In Malaysia, we have 2 regions, West Malaysia and East Malaysia. So the West Malaysia is called Peninsular Malaysia, and East Malaysia is Sabah and Sarawak. In fact, the mangrove cover in East Malaysia is almost 82% when compared to the East Malaysia. Anyway, it is Malaysia, the mangrove cover is almost 6th in the world. So I will take you now to the Matang mangrove forest. It is located in Peninsular Malaysia on the west coast in state Perak. The forest area is 403 square kilometers of the forest. And this particular forest is known for its silvicultural management since the beginning of 1902. That means it's almost 120 years old silvicultural management. And most popularly, Matang forest is known as the best managed mangrove forest in the world. However, best, it has some concerns, which I will show you in some of the slides in the coming slide. But it is popularly known as best mangrove forest. That is from the literature. Anyway, the main purpose of this forest silvicultural management is production of the poles, mangrove poles, and the production of the charcoal. So to facilitate the mangrove poles and mangrove charcoal, the forestry department in Malaysia, they release a working plan once in 10 years. So every 10 years, they update the working plan for the production of the poles and the charcoal system. Yes. Press for it. Yeah. As you know, this production of poles and go back, please go back. You please go back. I want to say, the production of poles and charcoal is really is a livelihood for thousands of people there. For them, it is more than gold. So they call it as black diamond. That is the black diamond. So many popular people and their families depend on the cycles from last 120 years. Yes, Farid, next slide, please. Yeah, coming back to the best, the word best, how best it is. So in recent years, there is a considerable increase in scientific studies, especially focusing on Matang mangrove management. So earlier during 1990s, the people try to say it is the best managed mangrove forest, but slowly the term has emerged into by a quote saying that reputedly the best managed or arguably the best managed and so on. So most recently, everybody is appreciating silvicultural management. which was found to be sustainable. So, however, how sustainable? What are the ecological concerns? That will be highlighted by Farid in the coming up slides. So, next slide, please. Yes, this is the study area of Matang mangrove forest. What you see in green color, that is called as productive forest. The productive forest is almost 80% of the forest is productive forest in Matang. It is dominated by two species, Rhizophora apiculata and Rhizophora mucernata. So Rhizophora is the best species for the production of charcoal in Malaysia, and that's why the charcoal what you make out of Rhizophora is really shines. Probably that could be also one of the reasons they give the name diamond actually. So along with the productive forest, there are also different forest categories in Matang. Some of the species which are at the river mouth, that is the pioneer group of vegetation, and also some of the forest is known as transitional forest, and also there is some forest known as virgin jungle. That means that forest patch never disturbed from last 100 years. That is meant for nature education and research purpose. So there are different kinds of forests. So, but anyway, 80% of the forest is dominated by the productive forest to exploit for poles and charcoal. Next slide, please. Yes, this is what happens in Matang. The forest rotation is 30 years forest rotation to make poles and charcoal. So how it goes on? It is a cyclic manner. So once they have a stocking, that means plantation of the forest with the Rhizophora species, they wait for 15 years to go for the first thinning. So then they give another 5 years gap so that the forest will attain 20 years. That means they go for a second thinning at the age of 20 years. The first thinning at the age of 15 years, second thinning at the age of 20 years. The thinning products, outcome of the thinning is the mangrove poles. So then once the second thinning is finished, then they wait for 10 years. That means the forest will attain 30 years age. So that forest will be clear cut for the charcoal production. They cut into 1.6 meters logs and they make charcoal kilns and they arrange inside to make the charcoal process. So the thinning, the benefit of thinning is one way to reduce the density inside the forest and leave the other trees to grow better. So that's how this 30 years rotation is taking place for more than a century now. So the further insights will be highlighted by Farid. Farid, over to you, please.
Farid, could you do this very, very fast and perhaps even skip some slides, because we would really like to have some question and answer time, and we only have 15 minutes left. Farid, we cannot hear you.
Farid voice missing.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we do. Go ahead.
All right, then I have to share again. Just let me know if you see my PowerPoint in presentation mode again.
Yes, we do. Go ahead.
Okay, so what Satyam showed is a very simplified version of a much more complex supply chain involving different stakeholders, from the cutters, the boat drivers, log arranger, log bearers, fire monitors. So it goes all over and over again. And we actually studied each of these tasks within the supply chain of charcoal. And you see here an example of a stone kiln that is used in Matang. And there is about 489 of them. So it's quite a big area, like Satyam indicated. Now, these export products are either going to domestic, so it's not really export, so the poles are staying within Malaysia, and the lesser quality charcoal is also staying in Malaysia, but most of the high value charcoal and also what we call the white charcoal, strangely enough, is going to export for Japan. Now, our main questions were, how can we help the management of Matang Mangrove Forest Reserve? And I'm not going to go into details of how sustainability, how it affects biodiversity, how the people can make a living, or what the carbon budget is. These are very important questions which we do investigate. But for this particular end of the talk, I will focus on how old is the forest patch, how much charcoal can we get, and it all comes down basically on how much biomass is in a certain forest patch. So we have a number of publications. I will skip these slides for time reasons, but we basically use remote sensing, GIS, and remote sensing. We use aerial photographs, satellite images, and even drones. And so each of these different steps in the cycle, the 30-year cycle that Satyam explained, can easily be detected through remote sensing, and particularly when looking at the moisture index, you can clearly see when the forest is cut. You will say, yeah, you can see it also in the field, but this is 40,000 hectares. Just like our colleague who presented in front just before us indicated, it's a patchwork of the lands, and they're all in a different successional stage. And so what was very important in our remote sensing research was that we had to have an age map of the forest, because the documents from the forest department, and despite having this management plan, are not always accurate. It means that if the management plan says it has to be cut this year, maybe the cutting will be done 2 years from now, or was already done 2 years ago. But this was very important for us to have a reconstruction of forest age. And of course, every patch stays in a different successional state. So as some patches grow older, other patches are cut. Another important thing was height of the forest and biomass. Of course, biomass in order to know how much charcoal we have, and height also for the allometric relationships. And we used this actually to develop an app in which we could forecast how much biomass and how much charcoal was going to be available. To summarize, so that's the prediction part of this research. Of course, there are benefits to the whole mangrove forest reserve in Matang, as Satyam indicated, erosion control, wildlife habitat, and so forth. But there are also growing concerns that the way and the 30-year cycles are maybe a little bit too quick, and that it would not be able to continue harvesting charcoal at, or decent amounts of charcoal at 30 years of growth. The last 2 slides, I want to emphasize that it's not only a forest where charcoal is taken, it's also an area for biodiversity. It's also an area for ecotourism, and there are ecotouristic tours. You can even stay in chalets. So it's much more than just a charcoal operating forest. And what's very important for us is that we study not only this charcoal part, but also the people part. It's not only the vegetation dynamics and the remote sensing, the restoration ecology, but also we have to reconcile nature, people, and policy. And in this particular charcoal context, well, nature is of course the trees that are producing charcoal in the first place, but the people, also the people that depend on the charcoal, and the policy, those the policy makers that can make it more sustainable for the planet. Oh, I hope that was quick enough, Tuyeni.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Farid. So we have just seen 3 very, very different models for how to produce feedstock. There are a lot of questions, and I can see a lot of questions are about actually the efficiency of kilns. And just to, I think that is a clear message to us that we probably need to have a webinar that specifically just discusses kilns. And so we will not answer the kiln questions today. I think we need to focus more on the feedstock questions. And perhaps the question that's been repeating over and over again, and I'd like to bring it up to primarily to the TFCG model and to the example that we just saw now. There are questions about why did you choose natural forests and forests that have high biodiversity value instead of planting exotic, fast-growing species? There have been several questions around that theme. So if you could very, very briefly, Meshack, and then Farid or Satyan, tell us why you chose to produce a feedstock from natural systems versus plantations of fast-growing species.
I can
Meshack,
answer
please.
that in
Yeah, Farid, go first.
Sorry, yeah. I can answer that in the sense that, as Satyam also indicated, it's already a practice that has been going on for 120 years. So it's quite historic. And these species that are planted are also the species that you find in the natural forest. The only difference now with the natural forest is, of course, that this is a very monospecific stand, and the natural forest is much more multispecific. But yeah, that's what is available now. So we actually came into so it's not we who chose this, and it's a government-operated thing, and we are studying the effect of it. We are studying the effect on biodiversity. I can maybe let Satyam move a bit into detail.
Okay.
Satyam?
Yeah. Then maybe and how about Meshack with the TFCG? Why did you decide to harvest from Mwampamba woodland versus plantations of exotic, fast-growing species, or maybe not even exotic, just faster-growing species?
Yeah, I think that is excellent observation. So charcoal has been used, I think, as my colleague said, charcoal has been used for many years, and it has been really sourced from the natural woodlands. So the reason why we chose to go for Mwampamba woodland is because we are concerned that the current rate of deforestation is mainly through agriculture. So these forests, you see, the Mwampamba woodland, they are being converted into another use. So at the end of the day, it is the return from the land. So the policies in the country don't recognize or don't support the value of natural forests, especially in the Mwampamba, to be recognized as a development. Now, as a result, communities are deciding to convert this land into agricultural land. So our essence was to make sure that if we develop a sustainable system, these forests could be harvested for quite some time. But second, according to the land policy or the land act in the country, you have three types of village. You have village land, reserved land, and the general land. So 21 million hectares, they are all in the village land. They are not protected, they are not managed, and you could witness them disappearing in the next 40 to 50 years, because the rate of deforestation is about 400,000 hectares. So we thought if we don't do anything, then we are likely to lose these forests. Why we did not go for plantation? The plantation, the economic return from plantation cannot compete. If the business as usual continues, you cannot make any money from the plantation, because the calorific value from the plantations is very low compared to natural forests. So basically, even if you do it today, you cannot compete. Those who are doing it, those who are using like acacia, the charcoal is the byproduct, is not the main production for charcoal, that you are planting the trees to produce the charcoal. So basically the return of investment. If you are doing plantation, it doesn't pay. It doesn't even encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So we've seen three very different systems. One of them is what Mary showed was very much what a farmer could do on their land. What Meshack showed was what a community could do on their land. And if I understand correctly, Farid and Satya, this is the mangrove project is a government, a state project. Is that the case?
Yes, Forestry Department.
Yes, so yes.
Please go ahead. Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so it is a government operated and government managed so by the Perak Forest Department. But then the cutting of the trees and the cutting of the poles and the making of the charcoal is how can I say subcontracted to charcoal factories that are then in charge also of managing these patches in 2.2 hectare patches.
Okay. All right, so we have 2 minutes to go. We really do need to wrap up. Thank you. I can see there's been so much exchange in the chat function with people actually answering some of the questions, providing information about their own projects and their own initiatives. This is great. We will also we will clean this up a little bit, the chat, and send it to you along with the presentations. Thank you so much, Mary, Meshack, Farid, Satyan, for sharing with us these experiences. You can still contact them directly to get more answers to many of the questions that you've posed. And I'll pass on now to Sylvia, the director of the Charcoal Project, to wrap up. Thank you. Go ahead, Sylvia.
Thank you, everybody. This is a great conversation. I really appreciate the panelists and Tuyeni moderating and all of your activity in the chat. There's really clearly a lot of questions we still need to look at and focus on in research and discussion. I'm showing our list of webinars that we're suggesting for the coming year, but certainly based off of our discussion here, as well as what we had always intended, is we are open for suggestions. So if you have something that you think we should discuss in a future webinar, please send us an email about it, and we will add it to our list and consider having our experts weigh in on it. So again, thank you all for participating, and really appreciate, again, our panelists and our moderator today. And we hope to see you in the very near future. Again, check us out at charcoalproject.org, or you can get more information at info@charcoalproject.org. Thanks again, everybody. Signing off, and take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much. Bye.